So I also want to ask you guys about arrangement and instrumentation. Lex, I've been listening to a lot of your stuff recently, and the instrumentation on it is awesome. It just sounds beautiful. There's these really delicate parts, and I'm wondering what, it feels like there's restraint. There's sort of like, okay, this is tasteful, and we're not going overboard with it. It never feels like it's too much. It feels like the instrumentation is all helping the song. I'm wondering what does that take? Like, is there the temptation there to go beyond? And do you know, like, when you get to that point, do you know, okay, this is it. This is all we need in the song.
The temptation's there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my sensibilities, I lean towards understated, just the way I play.
Right.
So that's kind of a natural, that's just how I hear things. But yeah, I don't know, you've worked with me a bunch. It's hard to even know.
Well, one of the things that records can, they have a tendency to want to become disorienting quickly. So you start out with something that's attracting, you're creating a song and it's got this whole thing, you're creating this painting of a sound. And because we have multi-tracks, it's very easy to just like sort of, with little respect, change that painting very easily by changing all the levels and all the sounds. And when you work on a song and you build it, your mix changes around and things start to disappear into the track and things like that. And, a lot of times I think your ear might tell you, it really needs something more here. It really needs something on top. And then the first ideas start to get more and more buried, And so, I don't know what the answer to that is other than to try and print roughs along the way too, because you'll be surprised. I've had rough mixes, still do, rough mixes that beat out the mix.
Yeah.
And you have to,
happens a lot.
you have to, if you don't capture them, you will forget about them and you won't necessarily be aware. But then if you do capture them, you could either go back to the rough and the original balance of instruments, or you can use that as a reference and you're like, wow, I had forgotten that the song could sound this good in this way, and that there was this kind of balance between the bass and the kick drum and all that, the rhythm section. And so keeping those along the way and referencing them really helps, And I think that sometimes taking something that's pretty simple and just adding that extra level of excitement that the mix might offer, just a little bit more, you discover that there was plenty of sound there and plenty of music there to begin with all along. You just didn't know it anymore.
Yeah, I'll take things farther than they need to go.
Yeah.
And then start peeling
dial
away
it back a little bit.
And you'll find the sweet spot. You know? I think that's a lot of times what I do.
Yeah.
I also like to, I take a lot of time figuring out who is going to be playing and try to get them on the get them all together and play as a band.
Yeah.
And that will often dictates how much space is in the song, because I know the players and they create all this space without filling all the gaps. Mm-hmm. And then come overdub time, you might not need to add anything. It's already finished,
Yeah.
You don't have to stack, you don't have to, don't double every guitar. That can be a trend to just start doubling things. Mm-hmm. It's intoxicating, but, then it'll get annoying after a while.
Yeah.
When you get into mixing.
That's the beauty of tracking with a full band too, is you arrive at the arrangement of that whole sound so much sooner. And I think so. I know I've built, records one brick at a time, mm-hmm. and it kind of sucks, it's a little bit fun to do that, but you're just flying blind the whole time.
Some folks are really good at it, and that's a talent.
Yeah.
And that comes from experience too.
Yeah, and that's not I'm not as good at that. I'm better at getting a community together and doing it.
Yeah, I guess the analogy would be, if you're going to build a song one brick at a time, you better have a good blueprint, which comes from experience, or you're going to end up with something and you're like, wow, why doesn't that look anything like a house?
This is your architecture
Oh,
school
yes.
talking.
Exactly. Oh yeah, right. So one last architecture analogy. When I was
Yeah.
in architecture school, this is a good one. When I was in architecture school, they always talked about architecture as being frozen music, and I was like, screw that, man. I want to go do liquid architecture. So
Nice.
that was my transition there.
Well, I think that's as good as any of a point to end on.
All right, great. Yeah, good timing.
We could turn it over to everybody for questions. Just anybody can chime in.
Yeah, I got one.
Yeah.
So I don't really know the history and whatnot behind this studio, but I imagine it seems very entrepreneurial. So what would you say, I guess, from that standpoint of kind of taking a passive approach and getting immersed in the industry as opposed to a more aggressive approach, getting yourself out there and making moves? What do you kind of, I guess, see as, the benefit of being more aggressive and then maybe playing devil's advocate as to, are there any benefits at all?
You mean sort of doing it yourself versus trying to get a job somewhere?
Sure, yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Right.
I know for me, I think that it's just who I am, that I wanted to have my own place and my own job. I even remember my dad kind of telling me, when I was younger, that like you should really go, get work somewhere and learn from somebody who's really good. And I was always just like, somehow that turned me off. Like, even though it's a really good idea, it's a good idea to learn from people who know what they're doing. But I think that, if you are going to be an entrepreneur, and I think if you're going to be a do-it-yourselfer, you probably already know in your heart, you probably have the sense that you want to do that. And so that's what you should do. You should follow it, And it's definitely a long and arduous path, but it's full of lots of rewards. And you gotta just follow what you love doing, and that's going to lead the way. Another thing I think for me was not realizing when I was younger that the stuff I was doing then and what I was into then was the basis of what would be a success for me later. It can be easy to look at your own situations and think, I'm really into this thing. I really like doing this stuff. I like this kind of music, I like this part about music, but, I should be doing this, or I should be like these other guys and the way they do their music, or I should be like this, studio owner, or, I don't know who, but, I think that in the end, your greatest strengths are just what you bring to it right now. The stuff you're working on right now is probably going to be, a big part of what you're known for being successful about later. So hopefully that's encouraging.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Would you agree?
That's great. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just wondering, just going through my mind just now, just wondering for both of y'all, if there is a project that you feel that you didn't give your all to, like you didn't perform as you were supposed to. If there is such a project, what is it that you did that you didn't like, and that if you were given that second chance that you would take again and just make it better and whatnot?
That's every single day for me.
Well,
That's what I'm saying.
The whole point of always be prepared is, there's been a couple sessions I've been on that I just felt I wasn't prepared for it, and I could have prepared better, It's not a big deal, but that happens.
What you mean by being prepared, though? Get prepared.
Well, it
That kind of
depends
varies, doesn't it?
It really
From
does.
project.
It depends project to, if like in my situation, I get called for a lot of different kind of records, different styles of music. So, if I get called to do a style that might not be what I'm best at, it's up to me to put the time in and learn as much as I can about it before I get into that situation. And there's been times where and more than anything, I was like, this isn't what I'm best at. So you can beat yourself up. But next time you're better at it. So just, yeah.
Yeah, true enough.
What is that process like if you get called to do a record that you're not don't have a lot of experience in that genre? what can you do to sort of prepare in that case?
First thing I do is if I get called for something like that, I tell them, I'm honest. I'll say this isn't what I'm strong at,
Right.
and usually it's say a producer that's like, no, it's going to be cool. That's what I want. I want your thing. So, but I would do the homework if I know kind of stylistically where they're going to be. Just start listening, and really focus. If it's bass work, I'll focus on some players in that style. Just listen, and that's pretty much it.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm trying to think about my analogy, and it would probably more often be focusing in the sonic style, the engineering, what kind of stuff I would do, whether the mics are, whether the drums are in a dead space or whether they're in a live space with lots of room mics, whether it's a situation where players are in the same space this close to each other playing in order to get the right thing, or whether it's a situation where everybody has to be totally isolated and you have to be able to, remove elements and replace things in order to get the right kind of sound. But it's paying attention to that. As you get more experienced, you become, your need to prepare is hard, becomes easier, I guess. I mean,
and less. Yeah,
you don't have to learn as much each time. And I specifically remember the first engineering sessions that I did. Man, I used to sweat bullets, dude. I was losing my I was so nervous.
And wasn't one of the first projects like Daniel Lanois and Emily
Well,
Harris?
that was my internship. My internship was at Woodland Studios.
Yeah.
And I was actually a tech intern. So the only internship they had available there was to be a technician, which was great because I went and I studied under this guy, John McGriff, and he taught me how to solder. He taught me cabling. I mean, I got to recap a Neve console, He taught me how things were wired, how to build mic panels, all this stuff that I needed to build my own studio, essentially,
Yeah.
But what I didn't get was a chance to go into the sessions while people were doing stuff. However, that didn't stop me. So Daniel and Lanois came with Emmylou Harris to do Wrecking Ball at Woodland when I was there. Magnificent record, incredibly talented people. And he sent his assistant down, I think it was like 2 weeks before the record started, or 2 days. It was probably 2 weeks, And he just started showing up with truckloads of equipment, because that's the way Daniel would roll for his production. He would transform a place. If he was going to go into a studio, it was going to be transformed with his equipment, his instruments, his amplifiers, his tapestries, his incense, his vibe, his whole thing. Ginseng. The first thing he did when he came in was hand me a huge stick of ginseng to chew on. I was like, right me. But he was super friendly, so I started meeting the players on the records. They would hang out in the lounge, and so I got to meet all these people, and they were all really cool, and I was just way into it. And I think that whether you're allowed in or not allowed in, the musicians and the people making the record, they can sense if you're into what they're doing, and and it resonates with them. That's what people want. Lex talked about the vibe for the session and having the right kind of attitude, and that's what it is. It's about connecting with the right kind of people. So if you find yourselves in a place where you don't connect with the people, listen to yourself. Maybe it's not the right place. Go to the place where you do connect with people. The first studio I went to where I really connected with people was Alex the Great. And that was the first studio. I'd finished my internship at Woodland. They did have a job offering for me after my internship. And the offer was to be a technician and come in at midnight and fix things till 8 a.m. and then leave for $5 an hour. And I was like, I think that's not for me. But in all fairness, Bob Solomon, who owned Woodland, I think he knew that I was really a musician at heart, and he appreciated that I was diligent about the tech stuff that we were doing, and I was good at it. But I was going off to play in a band on a weekend, or I wasn't available for something. And he said to me, he's like, "What do you want to be? You want to be an engineer or musician?" And it's a good question, You got to ask yourself, what do you really want to be? And that's what you should start doing, But when I went to Woodland Studio, or when I went to Alex the Great, I met Robin Eaton and Brad Jones there, and I remember walking in, and I was just like, wow, this place is cool. This is like, I'm relaxed here. This is vibey. I could make a record here. This feels like music. It doesn't feel like a studio with a black leather couch in the back that is like, feels corporate like a bank. I'm not a fan of the black leather couch. They are comfortable, though. But it turns out, and I didn't build a black leather couch in my control room, it turns out later on that there's a good reason for that. The overstuffed couch in the back of the control room makes a great bass trap. So you should plan for one. You want an overstuffed couch in the back of your control room.
Yeah.
I have something that's probably cooler looking than that. It looks more like a ship's galley or something like that.
I have a 60s like vinyl couch. Looks cool,
Nice.
but is terrible.
Boingy.
Yeah. It's the stupidest. Might as well just put plywood on the back wall,
Right on. Well, what do you think? Should we? Are our listeners still listening?
I think
our
we're
viewers
good.
still
Does
viewing.
anybody else have any other questions? I mean, this stuff has been really helpful. Thank you guys so much.
Good. Yeah. Thank you guys for coming and doing this. This is
It's
great.
really cool. Did
And thank
everybody
you,
get
Nick.
a chance to kind of walk around the studio and see everything?
Yeah, what's the story behind the swords up there?
Good.
That comes from, those are like my stepmother. She just collected antiques, and then I grabbed them, and brought them down here. And then one of them has this beautiful leather scabbard on it, and you could slide it out. And then, of course, and I let my daughter play with them, and she just left it out in the rain immediately. And now you can't ever get it off. So, but yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the story. I'm sure there's more to it that I don't know, but I just like funky stuff like that. I mean, Pat Sansone, who's a musician who lived here in Nashville, brilliant musician, songwriter. He plays with Wilco now and has for years, and the Autumn Defense. He actually, when we were working together years ago and the studio was up in my house, he coined the toy box. He gave it the name. He was like, man, you should really call it the Toy Box Studio. So I was like, all right. Sounds good to me.
All right.
Yeah, that's my last tip. When people give you tips, when they do things like give you names for things or give you a design and let you have it, accept it. Use it. It's cool. It's cool to borrow. Music is about borrowing things from people,
Like me and Nick were having a discussion earlier, like just for fun. We were talking about the swords up there. He was like, "How would you mic two people having a sword?"
That's a good question. We might have to try that out.
Yeah. We'll put that on the next record.
Yeah, that's got to be on the Sound for Film series.
Yeah. Make a new video tutorial.
Well, so, hey, let's have a big thank you to Nick for putting this together.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Nice work. Nick is a fantastic intern. You can just ask him what it's like to be an intern, and you'll get the answer to how to be a fantastic intern.